Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Hello? If we can start getting to our seats. We started a little late this evening, trying to give people, because of the traffic, a little time to get here. And we're gonna have an opening prayer, and then after that, we're gonna make a few adjustments, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the program for the night.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. Let me take a moment for prayer. All heads bowed and hearts open. Heavenly Father, again, we come to you this day. Lord, we want to thank you for the sun that rose up this morning to give us the light upon our feet. But Lord, we want to thank you for the sun that rose to forgive us of our sins. Now, Lord, please have mercy on us. Thank you for your mercy and your grace. Now, Lord, as we come for this meeting, let it be in decency and order. Let the words and the work that's been put here in Gum Springs be example of community love, community togetherness as we move forward. Now, Lord, we want to thank you for those that are going to be presenters tonight, those that are part of the community. Bless them. These and other things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
All right, so we are going to make some adjustments. We're going to get close together and be a family. So if we can have some people that are willing to get up and combine to another table, that will be greatly appreciated. If it could be more centered. So those of you that are on the outside, you're the first ones to move. Get cozy, get cozy. We're a family down here at Gum Springs.
Can we move in a little closer, please? Because everybody's time and thoughts are very important here today, we had some other things that we're planning that we're going to move past that, because we want to be able, first of all, let me thank everybody for coming. Just by the fact that you showed up, showed a commitment that you have towards showing interest in your community. And we all should do that. There is parts of citizenship that requires your voice. It requires your vote. It requires your understanding. It requires the things that you can contribute to making this in all communities better. This is just not a thing that's done on the local level, but we're coming up on November. Your participation in the vote is extremely important. If there's somebody in here for any reason that is not registered, please register. Think that you may need a ride to the polls, let us know. We'll make sure you get there. We'll ask this time Mr. Chase to come up. He is the president of the Gum Springs Historic Society, president and founder of the Gum Springs Historic Society.
I'm the president of the Historical Society, founding director of the Gum Springs Museum. I just wanted to say that this effort, as we're now engaged in, has been going on for a long time. And I need to make that clear within everyone's minds. This just didn't come about, as couple of years, the last decade. It's been going on for a long time. And we're trying to bring it all to fruition. And what we're trying to bring to fruition is the historic overlay district for this extremely important African American community. And it's become harder because the people that kept this community intact from slavery to present day, most of them are gone. Most of them are gone. And we're now at the stage whereby we can usher in this reign for this community. But we need to have the people who are here today to understand the importance of where they live, to understand this is the information we need to pass on to everybody within this society, and what was important about the African American community, what they had to go through to survive. So I wanted to say this at the outset of this so we can have somewhat of an understanding. This didn't come about by happenstance. It's been a long time coming. And at the end of the day, we're fighting to make sure you are, we are, I hope we all have an understanding of this. If you don't, please ask a question. Because I look at the fact, when I look at Bethlehem Baptist Church, that red brick building standing up there today, that building was built during the Great Depression. Where did they get the money to build that building? Ponder the thought. And this community is full of stories like that. Ponder the thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
191 years from Springs community, and everybody should understand it's a free Black community in the South before the end of slavery. And we're still here. And the things that I could say a lot, I could tell you a lot, but we really want to hear from everybody else. But I encourage you to look up one word in all of you, put it down on your cell phone or whatever. When you go somewhere, look up gentrification. And at this time, we're going to turn this over to our consulting team.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. My name is Paige Pollard. I'm with Commonwealth Preservation Group, and I am one of the consultants who has been hired to work on this project with the community. We have a very short presentation because we want to dedicate most of the evening to hearing from you all in table discussions and then in a larger discussion about your about critical priorities that you have for the outcome of this project. Before we ask you all to share with us your feelings and thoughts about the project, we thought it was important that we anticipate and spend a few minutes answering questions you may have about us and our involvement in the project and its outcomes. Next slide. So while Denise gets the slides moving, then the agenda for this evening is really a series of questions that we want to answer for you all. And then we will ask you to share some feedback with us. And then there will be time at the end to interact with each of us individually. We have a series of stations, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the meeting. But tonight, we want to tell you a little bit about who we are, why we were selected for this project, and why we were interested in this project, and why we find it a privilege to be working with you all in this effort. What exactly are we working on, and where are we in the project sequence? What have we completed? What is ahead of us? And then we're going to end the presentation, the formal presentation, with the purpose of the meeting tonight to launch you into conversations at your table that will help enable us to move our project forward. I'm going to hand the mic over to Ashley Spivey. We are working as a team, and so we're going to handle this presentation as a team so you can get to know a little bit about each of us.
Thank you, Paige. Good evening, everybody. Good evening.
So my name is Ashley Spivey, and I am the anthropologist that has been brought to join the team to bring an anthropological perspective that focuses on culture, right, and community. And for the next slide, I know we were asked to talk a little bit about our backgrounds and our learned experience. So, thank you. As I mentioned, I'm an anthropologist. I'm a member of the Pamunkey Indian tribe. Our reservation community is located here in Virginia, about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours from your community here in Gum Springs. And the Pamunkey Indian Reservation is actually one of the oldest continually occupied indigenous reservations in the United States. So we understand the importance of space and place and history and stories and preserving those for future generations. And I just wanted to provide an example of just one project, community-based grassroots project that I was involved in and that I've worked with that I think is similar to the goals and the priorities that you have here at Gum Springs. And that is the restoration of our 1909 schoolhouse. Just like the African American community, our people were not allowed to attend schools with white children. And so we had a separate state-sponsored reservation school. My grandfather attended this school, his father attended this school, his mother attended this school, and it went up to the 8th grade. And I'm sure some of you know the history of Indigenous education in the United States. If you wanted an education beyond the 8th grade, you had to attend a federal Indian boarding school. And my grandfather, and along with his siblings, attended those schools. And it's a picture of him actually there at the graduation steps at the Eastern Band of Cherokee in North Carolina. That is where he went to boarding school. So from our school to another Indigenous school, he was able to receive his education. And education was important to our folks. And so we worked hard to ensure that the building that housed over 100 years of education was preserved for future generations. And so that project, I think, corresponds to the work that we're trying to do here, as I understand that you guys are trying to protect not only the spaces and places that are still standing and extant, but the histories and the stories that are represented in the wider community and all of you to share that for future generations. Thank you.
And so, not wanting to put Ashley on the spot, we decided 2 of us ought to present a little bit about our lived experience. This slide shows the most successful Toyota dealership in Cagos, Puerto Rico on the right. But what I see when I look at that slide is my grandmother's house. The slides on the left are pictures of me with my grandmother and my great-grandmother at her house, which is actually where you go get your loan and sign your paperwork for to buy a Toyota in Puerto Rico. This lived experience really helps, I think, me understand some of the pressures that you all feel. The pressure of development, the pressure of encroaching economic. Is this still on? Can you hear me?
Nope. Move it.
Can you hear me now?
Sound like the commercial though.
Can you hear me now?
That's this one.
All right, awesome. So I understand a lot about the pressure of development and the changes that development can have on how you perceive your own places of importance. And when this project came across our desk and we talked about it in the office, this is immediately the life experience that I thought of. Because again, everyone in Puerto Rico looks at that and thinks about buying a Toyota. I think about spending my time with my family, and I'm grateful that my grandmother's house is still standing. I'm grateful that it's there in a different use. But there's no doubt that the feeling of that place has changed dramatically. And when I go back to visit my family in Puerto Rico, I never know if it's still going to be there, if it's still going to look even remotely the same. And so in that sense, the needs that we saw for this community really resonated with me.
All right, good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing? Doing good? All right. So my name is Derek Hiram. I get the next, I guess we gotta wait till the next slide. I'm a professor at American University and I am the sociologist. So I have had learned experience, but also life experience that relates to why I do the work I do and why I'm here. Mr. Carter mentioned one word. He said gentrification. That's what I've been studying my entire career. So I've looked at the gentrification of the south side of Chicago. Did a research project looking at Harlem in New York City and also Shaw U Street in Washington, D.C. So that's my professional experience, but it relates to my personal life. And you probably look at, why is this white guy up here studying Black history and Black communities? And what is he to offer about gentrification? So I grew up in a suburb of New York City, a pretty affluent one, but I played basketball in Harlem. I wanted to go play for the Knicks. I didn't go play for the Knicks, but I played for Riverside Church, which is in West Harlem. And I played in the Rucker League on 155th Street. And this is Harlem coming off the crack epidemic. This is the late 80s, early 90s. This isn't Harlem of today with the Red Rooster and whatever 125th looks like. It's totally gentrified. But the experience that I had with my teammates who were from Harlem and the Bronx, and also me seeing Harlem at the time where the boarded up brownstones were crack dens. And the city couldn't even give those things away for $1. The drug dealers were right at the park at the Rucker League. This environment was affecting my teammates and my friends. This was inhibiting their life chances. But for me, I just bounced in, played some ball, bounced back up to the suburbs. So I had a different life trajectory. But I wound up going to Colgate, then go to UNLV or NC State or UNC or UVA. But I learned sociology. And I read William Julius Wilson's work, When Work Disappears. I read Massey and Denton's American Apartheid about how I had this experience of New York City being segregated. Well, all our cities are segregated. Why are they segregated? I started to learn that in college. And when I get my PhD at the University of Chicago, started studying the south side of Chicago, State Street Corridor, which had at one time the most public housing in the nation over a mile period of just a mile stretch of just high-rise public housing. So when I went out, started studying that, started hanging out, started playing ball, started talking to people in the projects. Well, the projects were coming down. 20,000 people were displaced from the south side of Chicago. And my dad says to me, Derek, this shit is happening in Harlem. You got to come back here. This area is gentrifying. So I go back to Harlem, not to play basketball, but to study it. And to get in touch with the politicians to learn about how they were fighting gentrification. Harlem gentrified, but the public housing didn't go down. So my research is all about how do you get investments into underserved areas like Gum Springs, but do it in a way that keeps people in place and stops displacement.
Right.
So that low-income people can benefit from the resources that haven't come to their community. So I know I'm kind of going on and on a little bit, but I will cut it a little short. But all to say is I've studied some of the most historic African-American communities in the country. Then this project came across my desk. And fortunate that it did, because this history starts real early. 1833. 214 acres given to somebody who was formerly enslaved.
Right.
Before Shaw U Street, before Harlem, before the south side of Chicago, there was Gum Springs. And this history needs to be told.
Right.
This is incredible American history.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Yes.
I want to work with you to help preserve that history and tell that history to the world. Thanks.
Thank you. Southside.
I'm back and that's hard. Wait, can you hear me? Okay, and that's hard to follow. I'm back to talk about learned experience, right? So, like Derek, right? I pursued an education. I have a PhD in anthropology. On the same one we were just on. It's okay. A part of the reason why I pursued a PhD in anthropology was because, you've seen a picture of me with my grandfather. That's another picture of me with my grandfather actually doing archaeological research on the reservation. I chose to pursue it because people within my community who had lived, right, and are the creators of history were not being treated like experts in their own right, right? It was outside white folks, white academics that were telling our stories, and they were getting it wrong.
There you go.
And I was sick of seeing that, as were the other folks in my community. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go get those credentials behind my name, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to work with my community to help protect our histories and our stories and to tell them from our perspectives. And I chose archaeology as a path because, so the first example I shared was an extant resource, right? It was a building that you could, touch, that you could see. The majority of our resources are not above the ground. They are underneath the ground, right? Because the majority of our lands, we don't own them anymore. They've been taken and stolen from us. And so the resource that we look to help tell our stories is the archaeological record. And so that is the main thing. So I have an understanding and experience of working with resources that you cannot see with the naked eye, and also utilizing that skill set and that resource to tell our stories. You don't need an extant building, right, to necessarily tell the stories. You can use the footprint to tell the stories, because what matters is the stories themselves and the folks who have experienced it, or have perspectives around the resource and its priorities. So that's another reason why coming to join this team to work on this project was important to me, because I have the experience of working within my community that has resources that have been destroyed for hundreds of years, but there's still a footprint there to tell that story. And that footprint can only be told and understood from your perspectives. So thank you again. Everyone,
Hello.
everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Laura. I'm an architectural historian on the consultant team. I was the one who was walking around with a big old camera taking pictures of everyone's houses and all of the built resources in the neighborhood. And I'm just going to be really quick and share, next slide, please. A similar project that my firm completed recently in Maryland. It was a study of Asian American communities throughout Maryland. And so what I really took away from that is what we've been hearing from the rest of the team up here, in that, yes, we're looking at buildings that are still here because that's what we have to work with, is the built environment that remains. But there's also so many stories that have been lost and aren't expressed in the built environment, and that's where we rely on the communities. In that project, we also did oral histories like we're doing here, and heard from the residents of these small enclaves of Asian American communities throughout Maryland, to hear their stories, tell their stories, and see if there are built environment in places that represented their history. And one other takeaway there is that often when you think about a historic building, you think something beautiful and grand and huge, and that's not the case. It doesn't have to be big and beautiful to tell a story that's important. So.
Hey, I'm Selena Adams, and I work with Paige Pollard at Commonwealth Preservation Group, and I'm focused on public engagement. So I'm just going to share briefly about a couple of projects that we've worked on and how that's kind of shaping our thought process going into this project. Yep. Going into this project better? Better? I can try and project a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. So just there's a few on the screen, but a few projects that I wanted to highlight. We recently have been working with St. Paul's College, which is a historically Black college that is no longer in use. And so the alumni no longer have access to the actual campus. And so then the question arises of how do we preserve the history and the community and the value that exists in that space, and the importance of the cultural heritage, the oral history, the storytelling, and the traditions really rise to the surface. We've also been trying to like digitize documents. There's a museum there that we've been working with to be able to collect materials and have ways for folks to still engage in a meaningful way and be able to keep the memory alive despite not having access to the location that they once used to live and reside. Another example that I wanted to mention is a project that's currently in progress. We're working in one that's focused on Black churches throughout the state of Virginia and being able to recognize them on the National Register. So just the list of places that's considered worthy of preservation. There's a history of overlooking those churches because they don't look a certain way and they don't fit the architectural criteria, and suggesting that there's less importance and less value in that because of those criteria that are created to identify what's important. So being able to instead highlight the cultural heritage, the long history, and the value of Black churches and community, both for the Black community itself, but also more broadly for the nation as a whole, and being able to tell those stories and really being able to listen to community members. We're not wanting to come in and be like, this is what we think is important aspects of your history. We really want to hear what you think is important. What are places that are important to you? What are your values? And we want to do the same thing today. So I wanted to share a bit about that. We're going to transition to the next slide. And just to give a brief overview of what we've done so far and what we're doing. So there's three main components of the project. We did an architectural survey that Laura just mentioned, where she went around and took pictures of the physical buildings. That was done in July to August, so that portion has been completed. We're also working on some research, some of which we're doing online, just seeing what's available, and then also working with the CLT to see what resources you all have here and what things, maybe blind spots in our own research, so being able to fill in those gaps and have a fuller understanding of the history of the community. And then we're also going to be collecting oral histories. We collected 2 today, and we'll be doing more tomorrow. And those folks were also selected by the CLT. So that's an important aspect of that. Go to the next one. I think this might be page.
So Lena did a great job of summarizing kind of where we've been. Wanted to take a minute to talk to you about what happens moving forward. We have been asked by the county, working with the community, to prepare sort of a list of tools and opportunities that we see that could be of use as the community moves forward in establishing in the future a visioning process. And so you've heard from a wide variety of team members. We tried to pull together a team of broad perspective, broad experience, so that we could deliver a set of tools that really represents the entirety of what is available in our expertise. So the input that we have collected to date, the oral histories that we will continue to collect, the research, the survey, and most importantly, the feedback that we hear from you all, from the community, will guide us as to what tools we should include in the feasibility study, because those tools are intended to help you to acknowledge, recognize, celebrate, protect Gum Springs and the elements of Gum Springs that make it Gum Springs to you. So moving forward, at the end of this project, what you will get from us is that list of tools. The county has in mind that there will be a visioning process that goes along after this study is concluded. And that visioning process will be the way that the community looks at our tools that we've recommended and maybe finds others, and then begins to prioritize what gets implemented, how, and by whom.
And so as we're going through having our discussions and engaging with different activities that we have planned today, these are some things that we want to focus on, so things to consider as we're going about those. So these are just some questions here about what tangible resources are here, what are actual buildings, places, whatever, that kind of come to mind that are important to you and to the community. Also being able to consider intangible things. Are there certain traditions? Are there places that used to be here but are no longer here? Places that maybe the building's still there, but it's now become something different, and being able to talk about those things and identifying those as well. And being able to just kind of share about values that you have, values that you've heard from community members, where are there similarities, where are there differences, just so we can be able to identify some of those things in our discussion. So just an overview of what we're going to be doing today. So we do have some stations around the room. There's going to be a map station in the back. You can see the large map that's up there. And that's going to be a place for folks, you'll get more direction to, but a place for you to be able to identify maybe physical locations that are important to you, whether they're still there or not, and then write a bit about it. So whatever you're willing to share, whatever you're comfortable sharing, that's going to be an opportunity to do that, and also share how you want your history to be recognized and celebrated. Then over in this corner over there, we have, if anyone brought anything that they want to be digitized, if you want us to scan it, that's over there. Again, whatever you're willing to share, there's absolutely no pressure to do so. And then on this far right side, it's a space for feedback. So if there's things that you didn't get to share, or things that you really want to, whether it's about the process that we just discussed or specific content, that would be a great place to do it. And the consultants will be placed throughout the room, so you'll have opportunities for questions. So before we jump into these table questions, I want to mention to the online folks that you're going to be going into breakout rooms, but we're going to take some time. There's a facilitator at your table and a note taker. So we're going to go through and discuss some of these questions with the folks at your table. Everyone have an opportunity to share whatever comes to mind, and they're going to be taking notes and sharing that with us. So again, just know that that's where the information is going to go. And we're just going to take a few minutes to do that now. I think we're going to start with 10 minutes for that first question. And I'll just give a heads up when we transition. When would be a good time to transition to the second question? Any questions? Any quick thoughts? Alrighty, so take about 10 minutes for the first question. I'll give an announcement. Yep. You want to?
Good evening, everyone. My name's Stephanie Newman. I'm a planner with the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. As Selena said, we're just going to merge into a question and answer section at the moment. If you're interested in sharing, just go ahead and unmute yourself. The button to unmute is at the bottom of the square on your screen that shows your name. If we run out of time and we can't get to everyone, we will provide information at the end of the meeting on how to share your story with the consultants. After a small group discussion, we will return to the larger meeting group and report out on what we've discussed. Is there anyone who would like to be our reporter for the group? I see we have, I think, 3 participants or 4. Let's see. Miss Lolly Reinhardt, Miss Teresa Moore, and I see someone who has come on the phone as well. Is anyone interested in reporting out for us or discussing the first question? I can put it in the chat as well. So the first question is, what are the key factors that define Gum Springs' identity? What do you want us to know about the history of Gum Springs and the community? And if you have any problems unmuting yourself, just go ahead and type that in the chat and I can assist you. Yes.
Hi, this is Teresa Moore. So good evening to
Hi, Ms. Moore.
everyone.
Good evening.
So a little bit on me. I grew up in Gum Springs, longtime resident, as were my, parents and grandparents, and so very familiar with the community. I guess what I'd like people to know is about the rich heritage of the community. All of the people who have, come out of the community, maybe things that they've gone on to do, just some of the, just the rich history that's here. It's almost 200 years worth of history.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ms. Moore, would you be interested in being our person to report out to the group?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to share for this question? Give you a few minutes to unmute yourselves. Ms. Moore, what aspects of the history are the most important to you, or are you most interested in?
I'm interested in many of the historical sites, things like Bethlehem Baptist Church and, the original facility, or I guess one of the two original facilities that's still standing next to the newer facility.
Mhm.
And there are, several other places, obviously, the community center, it's ties to the Saunders B. Moon Center. There was also a Gum Springs School on Fortson Road.
Okay.
And my understanding, because I have an older sister who's now 91, and she actually attended, I think, for a year, maybe one of the original Gum Springs schools when they were segregated, which was over on US 1. And now I think it is I think it's a small church right now. And before that, it was like a meat packing facility or something. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So it's gone through a lot of changes, but it's right there on the highway. So, obviously a key candidate to become, the next car dealership or something. But there's some history in that spot.
Right. And the community center was a school at one point, right? Was it an elementary school?
It was Drew Smith School.
Drew Smith. Okay.
Mhm.
Right. What an interesting life of a building, the one on Route 1, to be a school and then a meat market and then a church.
Yeah, the place was called Just Good Meats.
Just I have to look for that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And did you say your sister attended that particular school before it was a meat factory?
Yeah, she went there. I think maybe the last year it was open was her first year of elementary school. And then they built the school, I understand, on Fortson Road.
Okay, the Drew Smith?
I'm not sure whether the name was Drew Smith or whether the name became Drew Smith once it moved to the building that's the current site of the community center. Because the earlier Drew Smith, the earlier school was further up for Fortson Road.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay. And you said your family's been in this area for a long time?
Yes.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to share?
It's a quiet group.
It is. Well, what is it, Wednesday evening? So If you have anything else, we're more than happy.
Um,
Is your house the place where your family has lived, or have you all like changed houses, or is it a generational property?
no, so, well, let's do a yes and no.
Okay.
So my family actually lived on Riverside Road.
Okay.
And, you know, if you were to leave the facility, that if you're down at the community center and go up to
Yes.
Fortson Road, out Sherwood
Yes.
Hall Lane, it's
Mhm.
probably, you know, a mile, half mile so away is, would be Riverside Road. So my
Okay.
parents, or my grandparents, actually owned land there, and there were a lot of African American families on that road a long time ago. So at some point, I think when I was about 9, my parents and my brother and I moved out to the Spring Garden Apartments, which are just
Okay.
behind the community center there. So
Okay.
the Spring Garden Apartments are obviously still standing, but the area where I actually grew up in my early years, right next to Stratford Landing Elementary School, that has been completely, you know, regentrified, and, you know, they're just a big housing development all up and
Yeah.
down that road.
Right. Right. You've seen a lot of changes in the community since you
A
were
lot of
young.
changes. Yeah. So that photograph with the young lady's grandmother's house and the Toyota
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
dealership
right.
resonates.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. There's a lot of new development in that area. And are there any buildings that you
Yeah.
remember, in particular that you would frequent, like stores or something that are gone
I'm
now?
sorry. I'm sorry. It kind of broke
Oh,
up on my end.
I'm
It may
sorry
be
about
my
that.
Wi-Fi connection.
It could be me. No, I just wanted to know if there were any, buildings or stores or places that have been, removed or not there anymore that really, that you remember that were important to your childhood or.
Um, Maybe a little more so because I was quite a bit younger than my brothers and sister. But they talk a lot about a store. They called it Dooley Store. You know, kind of. I was too
Okay.
young to go on my own there, but but
Right.
they all did. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you remember where that was?
Uh, I thought it was somewhere near the intersection of Fortson Road and Sherwood Hall Lane. I can certainly
Okay.
ask them and they can tell me.
Mm-hmm. So relatively close to the community center, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, well, I think we'll be moving on to the next question shortly.
I can no longer see the main group on the screen. Are they still
So it looks like they just
chatting?
move on to the second question. Do you see I can read the
Okay.
question out. We just changed it on the screen. So as it relates to Gum Springs
Okay.
present, past, and future, what makes you hopeful and what makes you anxious or worried?
Ooh.
Not to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I saw something just jump up on the screen. I didn't know if that was anybody else trying to speak. I didn't want to
No, please. That was just
monopolize
us.
the conversation.
Oh, no, please. It was just us putting the question in the chat in case anyone is having a difficulty reading the slides.
So what things that make me concerned are,
Mm-hmm.
some of the development, what's going to be developed, some of the things that have changed, things that have been proposed as to how to develop. I'm afraid that it's going to, lose the character of the community. And proposals for things like expansion of the Route 1 corridor, which could conceivably, take away, land that would either then, box in the community, make it more difficult to access, the widening of, or the proposed widening of the road, which is like, all of those things are of concern. It's hopeful that the group is doing this study and starting to move forward, with some activity around, preserving what's obviously a rich and valuable history.
Yep. Yeah, that's what the study is trying to do is, identify what people think is important and do a more comprehensive survey of the area that hasn't been done. Are there any kinds of particular projects that you would like to see in the area? Maybe not new development, but rehabilitation of particular buildings or community. Go ahead.
Yeah, but just a personal thing that I would love to see, that the Bethlehem Baptist Church, that original church, that it's preserved, which I'm sure would be very expensive for a congregation to have to do that. But I think that the history in it is such that it merits preserving. There are old stained glass windows in that church that bear the names of lots of ancestors who were members of the church many, many years ago.
And that building, the older section is, I believe if you're looking at it, and I'm guessing from the front, it's on the right side. It's a brick.
It's on the
and then
right
they
side.
Extended.
It's a smaller red brick building.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And then they've built on, you know, a new sanctuary and new additional rooms, I believe.
Well, that's actually a completely separate building.
Oh, okay.
The-
It's not connected.
The big newer building is completely separate. So you have to
Okay.
go outside to access the little building. They're two separate
Okay.
edifices.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned the widening of Route 1. That's something we've heard before as well. I don't know, you know, much about that, but is there anything in particular with that that would, you know, you mentioned,
Well,
go ahead.
so if you think about it, if the plan, as I understand it, would be to widen the road to something like 10 lanes, total of 10 lanes, and
Oh, okay.
to run buses
Right.
down the middle of
Okay.
the road. So that kind of widening, I think, would force it to come into, let's say, the Spring Gardens apartments,
Mm-hmm.
and that little school or that property that was a meat
Right. Oh, right.
distributed
Okay.
area before. I think that would just probably disappear and all of that.
Right. Right. There would be some encroachment on those buildings and they would become threatened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. Looks like Miss Reinhardt is typing. Oh, okay. So Miss Reinhardt said she would love to see the old Bethlehem Church become a museum. Would you be hoping for a museum, like a history of the church or a history of the area? History of the church in Gum Springs community. That would be a beautiful building to have that in.
Oh. And there's a lot of history, obviously captured at the existing museum, but the church would make, a wonderful kind of additional spot, a place along the trail for somebody who is, going to see historic sites.
Right.
Near it. Yeah.
And it's close as well, so it wouldn't be, you know, too much of a trek if someone was interested in going, you know, to the museum that exists now and then go over to the Bethlehem building if that were to be a museum. Okay, we'll probably be moving on to that. Oh, there's the next question. Okay. So the next question is, please share specific examples of recent changes in Gum Springs that have affected negatively or positively its cultural heritage and identity. And I think we've touched on that a little bit more, but if there's anyone would like to expand.
Yeah. I don't know what
Hello?
has happened. Oops.
Yes?
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
I would like to expand on recent changes I see.
Sure.
And one of them is when it comes down to crime.
Okay.
It seems like they letting people come over here from the district or whatever, and they bringing crime into the community. We see the younger generation here. They have no morals, they have no respect for the authority of property. And I mean, it's a lot of history here in Gum Springs. And it's sad that the younger generation do not take the time out to want to listen to the older generation. But the situation we had that's affecting our community here is the crime.
Okay.
And you know, and you know, I mean, once upon a time, people could feel safe. You know, the elderly weren't walking there. You know, should nobody be afraid to walk out of their yard, sit in their yard? Our elderly parents or neighbors, we should not have to live in fear of worrying about this younger generation. You know, it's just sad what you see what's going on. How some of them even were born and raised here, and they had children. Their children turned out to be the ones out here committing crime and doing all kinds of other things. I mean, and tearing up the property, destroying the property. Now they build these apartment complexes for people to be able to afford to live in something affordable. But when you see people coming in here tearing up, it hurts. Because that's our tax-paying dollars that, you know, that we got to, you know, pay for all this. Everybody deserves to live in a measure of peace. But you got these people coming over here from the district and whatever, and I mean, just bringing crime over here. And you know, I have nothing against nobody coming over here. Coming over here, you know, everybody deserves to have be able to live peacefully. But the crime and stuff here is getting terrible, you know, and the carjackings, and then over at Ross, not too long ago, at Ross, you know, there was a carjacking. A baby was a 4-month-old little girl was in the car. And I just thank God that she's, you know, they got the individual and they got the car back. The grandfather had left the key in the car to go in there to stop, but he left the baby in there. And I don't know what he was thinking, but anyway, as a result, the child is okay. But this kind of stuff is senseless. You know, it's the crime, you know, and we need more unity. I mean, have those town hall meetings, and then you live in these apartment complexes, and you live in these townhouses, whatever. You see the crime around you, and you know, and it just seems like nobody wants to do anything. And then that's when we have to reach out to our county board supervisors, because they have to put some stipulations somewhere about the crime in this area. We have to do something about this. These kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, running around here, snatching purses, kicking people's doors in. That's not good. It's not good at all.
And you mentioned, you know, a need for unity. Do you feel that if there was more of a sense of community, the crime would be lower?
Well, we would have to get the police involved, but we have to be willing to work together. A lot of people, but some of them don't want it because some of their family members might be the one committing the crime. But I feel that it would help some. It would help some. And then I also feel that some of these parents should be held accountable for their children. You hold them responsible, because you know, and then again, some of the parents worse than the children. But what I'm saying, you start holding these people accountable for their children, hopefully something will give. You start holding people accountable for it. We can't blame everything on the teachers or the police or anything. Discipline starts at home.
Right.
It definitely starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of I see some around here where I live at. Doing things they ain't got, but you better not say nothing to their parents or grandparents, because they be ready to cuss you out or what. I mean, be ready to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And see, they don't realize that their children is gonna cost them to lose their homes and stuff because of what they doing.
Right.
You got to get a control over these children first. Because I see them hanging around here, 5 or 6 of them going around here throwing stuff at people's cars and stuff. That's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way Gum Springs, we don't want to have that mark on Gum Springs like that.
Absolutely.
Gum Springs have a lot of history.
Right.
Beautiful
Right.
history.
Thank you. Yep. Absolutely.
And so
Thank you for sharing that perspective.
You're welcome, ma'am.
I think we're probably going to go back to the main group soon. Is there anything else anyone would like to share either on this question or, just in general?
Oh, one other thing I was just gonna mention, I'm not sure what, if any efforts have been done regarding the old cemetery that's back behind the community center. If there are any efforts underway or tied into this for preservation of that, because there was a cemetery back behind the community center.
Okay. That is a question I'll have to ask the consultants. I'm not aware of anything, but that's good to know. Do you know the name of the cemetery? Was there a family name or anything?
Wow. I don't know the answer to that.
That's all right. I'm sure we can locate it. Miss Moore, is it the Peak Family Cemetery?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would be guessing to say.
Sure.
I defer to, someone else on that one.
Not a problem. We have a location, so we can identify it and ask the consultants.
Okay.
Yep. Well, thank you all for sharing. We really appreciate your perspectives, and I believe we'll probably be going back to the big group. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone in a couple minutes, but then Ms. Moore, if you're still interested in being our reporter, they'll call on you, and whenever you're ready, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Excuse me, Miss Moore? Miss Moore?
Uh-huh.
Yes, I wanted to know, are they gonna,
Yes.
since
Can
you're
you
the
hear me?
spokesperson? Yeah, I can hear you. Are they gonna, try to preserve some of what's left of Gum Springs down here?
I think that's, definitely the purpose of this committee or this study, as I understand it, is find out what things people really care about and recommendations for preserving things and what's the best way. Did I get that right, Stephanie?
Yes, and that's definitely a question when we go back to the main group that I'm sure the consultants would be happy to elaborate more on.
Yeah, but Miss Moore, what I was saying, about the changes, about
Right.
we have to do something about the crime down here. We
Hmm.
really do. We have to touch base on that because this is not what it was. This is not what Gum Springs stand for. Gum Springs stand for a whole lot, and there's a lot of beauty here. And it's just a shame that this younger generation have no regard for anything.
Yes, understood.
Because I looked at some of the people who the prominent families in Gum Springs, like the Belfield family, the King family, and the Taylor family, and some other families, Webb family. It's a lot. It's a lot of history here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a lot of beauty. As a matter of fact, my grandmother, she used to work. She used to had to catch the bus because she used to do days work, and she worked down in certain parts of in the Gum Spring. And she had to at the time, she had a bus. She would have take down here. She did house cleaning, and like I said,
Mhm.
she used to tell me stories about it. And it's Gum Springs has a lot to offer. And it's just a sad shame, that this younger generation, some of these kids, well, like I said, people moving in here, tearing up our community. And we don't need that.
I apologize for that. So it does look like we're going to go back to the main group. Since we're a small group, I'm happy if both of you want to share. I think you guys have great perspectives that could really help the consultants. So if you all would like, when it's our turn to share, I'm sure the consultants will call on us. Just go ahead and unmute yourselves and share your perspectives.
Okay.
Y'all should be able to talk in the room. Okay. Okay, we're gonna start with this first question. Gonna do a live question. Enthusiasm.
Folks, can we have everyone's attention?
Okay, so we're gonna start with the first question, and I'm just gonna choose a table. The way we're gonna do this is we're just gonna start with the table. They can share out whatever any thoughts they have. And if anyone has differing thoughts or anything to add, feel free to raise your hand and Peggy's gonna bring a microphone. Okay? So the first one is, what are the key factors that define Gum Springs' identity? What do you want us to know about the history of Gum Springs and the community? So if we can start with this for our table. Anyone who can, maybe the note taker or the facilitator, if you can share out.
All right, we can spend some time for question number one, just talking about first identifying the all Black community that lives here within Gum Springs. Looking at when you're younger, some of the older members looking out for some of them youth when way back when it was time for them to kind of get back home and get back in, so they're kind of staying in the right path and they're staying out of troubles and harm's way. There was kind of that guidance within the community. A very close-knit community. One thing that stuck out the most was family. Those family names have been a part of this community for decades, and making sure that rich tradition continues and making sure that education piece continues with the youth so they understand the history behind Gum Springs as well.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add for this question? Yeah, for question one still. I think Peggy's gonna pop back to you in a second.
I'm loud enough, so you'll be able to hear me. Sense of urgency, the sense of being able to make sure that we're connecting with the elders of the company, and have all their facts, to be able to give the facts and be able to give accounts for how things took place and how things were developing through here in Gum Springs, looking back at the OEO of 1963, where the Gum Springs got the first grant in the whole country to be able to start this community center and get this area up and running. Looking into just making sure that our youth are knowledgeable of the information as well once we actually get the information, making sure that we're enticing them to come in to be able to gain that same information, to be able to keep the knowledge of this community going on from generation to generation. Taking into consideration that there were a lot of groups here, clubs, whether it be the Springs baseball club, and people think that that's just baseball, it's more than that. They were a group of men that literally sat here and took pride in their community and also took advantage of their talent and their sport to be able to bring other areas around us together to be able to, again, show the history and the talents that were right here in their own community. Looking at the businesses again, like I said, the barbershops, I know Mr. Downey here is one of the local barbers in the area. They have a lot of that knowledge. The people here in the community come there. A lot of back then, Black folks didn't go to therapy sessions. Their bars were their therapy. This is how they shared information. This is how they passed knowledge along from each other. I think I hit all of them. Question. I'm sorry. We did, the question that arrived at this table was, overlay district, will it be considered federal or state?
Good question. From the standpoint of tools, remember what we are delivering is going to be a set of a document that outlines all of the various tools that might be used or selected by the community. Then you all will go through a visioning process. There are state and national designations that are recognition. They do trigger evaluation and minimization of harm to historic resources for federal undertakings, but they don't have any other regulatory bite. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, there is a local designation, a local overlay. That is where regulations exist. And so our document will likely include all of those amongst a variety of tools that are available. You guys have talked a lot about education tonight. I can envision that we will include some tools related to how you might approach educating new people to the community, children, etc. But to answer your specific question, we will address all levels of designation, the pros, the cons, and then let you all as a community through your visioning process determine what's right for you.
That answer the question? Page, oh, sorry.
I know one thing I wanted to add in is that the property that we know now is that 214 acres of Gum Springs was not the property that Westford inherited. He inherited property on the other side of Little Honey Creek. He sold that property and purchased Gum Springs. He had to add some money to it, and he purchased Gum Springs.
Actually, that was one of the things that we were going to point out about the identity, that it was actually, this was about the purchase of the property. The education, the 5 schools that were here, that was a big part of what we listed. Everyone assisted one another, like the other folks said. How this community built itself. Everybody contributed to the success of this community. It's also one of the things that I'm afraid is going to disappear. The Saunders B. Moon Community Actions Association. All the misinformation about this community is part of its identity as well. Kind of like Coach Moon, Mr. Moon over there said. But just all the information, you know, that like we talked about Route 1, how it goes from Maine to Florida. Fordson Road and the Potomac Trail and Sherwood Hall, a lot of that stuff wasn't even put in the other part of how we got the what is it? How they tried to have a lot of the infrastructure was not put in there to handle the water, which would turn it in, which is why folks try to part of why it runs into, they try to consider it part of a little muddy. So how did you say that? I typed it.
In regards to the Potomac Trail that has the different name as it travels from Maine to Florida, and here it's called the Potomac Trail. And it did not exist, or it came to Gum Springs, did not exist at Fordson Road to Sherwood Hall Lane. And so when they actually did that connection, what we know is Route 1 from Fordson Road to Sherwood Hall Lane, when they actually created that road, they didn't put in the infrastructure to take that water away from Gum Springs. And so when they actually built that road and it rained, it all came into Gum Springs. Gum Springs was successful. And then there's this misinformation about the Muddy Hole Farm. You say Gum Springs was part of the Muddy Hole Farm. The Muddy Hole Farm was on the other side of Little Honey Creek. So it's this terminology of Muddy Hole that they keep trying to apply to Gum Springs. No, it wasn't. The realities are that it was a successful farm. Westford, when he purchased it, the amazing thing, people still try to undermine and understate the importance of this community. So New York did that on a year or so ago. They opened up saying Westford, George Washington had an enslaved son. And then they continue to say misinformation. Westford starts the Freedman community of Gum Springs. Gum Springs was not a Freedman's community. Freedman's communities were started by the federal government to give the enslaved a helping hand out of slavery. They cut Westford off at the knees for what he did as a Black man in Fairfax County in 1833, enabling him to buy his property. Amazing. True. It's all of these amazing things that this community did. From Westford to the community building, the Joint Stock Club, the founded the new Community Action Association, starting the first Head Start program in the States. And the reality to me is that this building would have been gone if it were not for the Atomic Community. It would not be there. That's the reality. Every Black school in Fairfax County has been destroyed.
Oh, wow.
Those are the realities. And something as phenomenal as this community and this school and what the organization did within this community, it cannot continue to go. We must shout it from the housetops.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead now. That's right.
One of the most essential things about history is, first of all, the economic considerations, where people worked, made money to sustain their families and property, and also their education. And in order to understand the community of Gulf Springs and how they interacted with people around them, you need to know, first of all, where people worked, where they were able to find work, where they were able to get help in the community for their families, whatever. And one of the most peculiar things was the education. When we left elementary school here, we traveled 17 and a half miles one way to school each day. You know where Luther Jackson is, near Fairfax Hospital? That's where we went to school each and every day. And the reason why I mention it, we passed many other schools on the way that we couldn't go to. But we picked up students from other communities. So the Gulf Springs community had a connection to other Black communities in Fairfax County. And that's part of our history, because a lot of the other programs that were started throughout the county were done from the model that we had here in Gulf Springs. Okay. And the last part is that I feel fortunate that I only had to go 17 and a half miles. My older brothers and sisters had to go all the way to Manassas. Okay. So the whole idea of how we were educated, where we worked, and how we interacted with other communities around. Because Gulf Springs became more than just a geographical idea of what a community was. It became a concept, because everyone who associated with us, either through education, through association, whatever, consider themselves part of Gulf Springs. And that can't be deleted from the history.
Okay, for those of you who have not met me, my name is Paul Rowe, and from 1973 to 1978, I was the deputy director of the Somerville Movement Community Action Association. And in our discussion at this table, something came up that prompted my memory with regard to the building of this building that we are now in. We had programs in the school, but some additional money came available that the county could access and build this building here. And it almost didn't get built because the county was insistent on giving the community no say in how it's going to be used, what would be done in it, or couldn't be done in it. And it almost didn't get built because the Somerville Movement Community Action Association would not accept that. And we were down into the late afternoon hours when the opportunity would have been lost had the county not been able to submit the proposal with a plan for how it was going to be managed. In the end, it was saved because near the end of the day, the county came up with the true green light concept. That is, both the county and the community had to give a green light for something to happen here. If either the county or the community didn't give the green light, it wouldn't happen. And well, it's just something that came to mind because I was the person
personally involved in discussing with the county to try to resolve. And it was resolved in the way that I just described. And this is how we got this building that we are in right this minute. Built back in the, I guess it was in the mid-70s when that took place. And I was here at that time.
But we were willing to lose the building. We were willing to lose the building rather than not have trouble.
All right now.
Let's just see how that's everything.
Expired, or is that something different?
This was back in, I have to say, back in the mid-70s.
I can't hear, I'm sorry. What was the question?
I asked if that was the conservation plan that had expired, that gave the community the ability to have say-so and things and made it so that they no longer had that, free speech or freedom.
Everybody need a microphone. Everybody need a microphone, please. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lewis had talked about the conservation plan that had expired, and I was just curious to know if what you were talking about was that conservation plan that had expired.
No, the conservation plan was not, applicable to, discuss in connection with the building of this building. It was, isolated opportunity that came available by the county could get the money. This was to spend that money on this, building, but it wasn't willing to, at first, to give the community any say in how it would be used and administered. And so my discussion with them conveyed that to them, including the fact that without that, we were not going to accept the billing that they came up with, what I mentioned as the true green light concept. Both the county and the community, they had to agree on things, or each had veto power. And that's the way it was. So,
Oh, now that makes sense when you said it's
Yeah, I'll be real brief because I don't want to repeat a lot of things been said and everything, but if you notice, this table has a lot of history here. I mean, if you added up our ages, probably over 200. So, you know, but most of us went to elementary school here. I went to elementary school here from the first grade to second grade. Yeah. I remember you. But in 1965, we were transferred. I went to Harlem Hills Elementary School, where we had to leave and everything. But it says the key factors of what you want to know about Gum Springs. I'm just going to hit some key factors. Gum Springs relationship to George Washington. It's a lot of relationship with George Washington in Gum Springs. Plus West Ford. Everybody heard about West Ford and why he was honored for this land and everything. Peak Cemetery, which is right in the back, is connection with George Washington, a grave site back there. And plus, used to be called what, Jude Smith Elementary School. Miss Annie Smith, first school teacher here in Gum Springs, named after her, Jude Smith Elementary School. And plus, you know, Gum Springs had a lot of influence of great people coming out of here and did a lot of hard work. Like Mr. Chase said, that the churches, it's a historical thing. This building right here itself is historical, you know. So the land and the history and what Mr. Carter said about the joint stock club. Brought into property and sold to people that was able to buy some of this land. Have a great community senior citizen programs here. Keep advancing. But a lot of the other stuff, the people have already mentioned everything, but I just want to throw out some key things about how historical this community is. And I have one question about the anthropologist. What's the criteria of the guidelines that you have? What do you go by of saying this is a historical community?
Microphone. Thank you.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, so first of all, I'm just an anthropologist, but an anthropologist is can be many things, but in short, it's somebody who studies human society and culture. And like I said, I've taken the path in archaeology, and that's studying the human past through material remains. So
As you go through this community, what do you look for? What
So I'm going to. So there are different criteria for the different types of tools, right? That is going to be recommended in the final product that will be presented to the community. But in particular, one of the things that I'm coming in to help support and provide information on, one of those tools is called a traditional cultural property, right? And what I'm looking for is, yes, I need to pay attention to the criteria that's outlined by the National Register of Historic Places. And, you know, we can talk more about what those are, but the TCP, the traditional cultural property for me is, as I've stated, it's about connecting the dots, right? It's about looking at the built environment or the archaeological footprint or the connections to specific individuals, historical individuals, and how those things are connected to a living traditional community and how all of those aspects still inform the community's identity in the here and now. Right. So what I'm here listening to is the stories, the intangible components to an historical place, right? That you might not get in a documentary record or you might not see in a building. Because like, as I mentioned, it's the stories of the folks who lived here and have experienced this place and have learned the history. That's what I'm here, you know, to learn about, is to help connect the dots, the stories to the places. Hopefully that makes sense. It's not specific criteria, but that's what I'm here for.
And just to add to that, each member of the team has experience through our own lens. My background is in urban planning and architecture. But in my urban planning role, I have done a lot of work in communities and seen through the history of planning exercises how local government policy and procedure can affect community. We have, you know, a public engagement expert as part of our team who's looking at it through that lens. We have a sociologist, et cetera. So we are all looking at the tangible and intangible elements of the story. We're looking at the built environment, and we're looking at the significance of the community, and we're trying to pull that all together, informed by the priorities that you all tell us you have.
Yeah, microphone. Thank you. Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I would just say from, you know, my perspective as a sociologist, and what I've tried to do with the team here is to look at the other communities around the country that have already been deemed historical. Right. And so we look at like Harlem, south side of Chicago, Shaw U Street in DC, but then we don't have to go that far. We can just look at Parker Gray in Alexandria, Tinner Hill in Falls Church. And how does the history of Gum Springs relate to those communities, which have been deemed historical, either locally, state, or national? So I think like trying to contextualize the history that you all know here compared to the other Black historical areas in the DMV. So for me, you know, just I said in the beginning, like West Ford, I mean, that was it. It was like West Ford and the connection to George Washington. We could stop right there and say, that's the history. I mean, somebody to have the purchasing power to buy the land for this place. That's incredible American and Black history. So it should just be deemed historical right now based on that, and it's not. And because the thing is that we know is that these historical designations, doesn't matter what Page says, what the state says, or what, it's all politics, and it's political power that make that historical designation come to be. So I think most of us in this room know this history is rich history that should have been deemed historic a long time ago, but it hasn't. So Paige also mentioned, like, our job is to give you multiple tools because we don't know what the politics will be and how difficult it will get to get the historical overlay, even when you already know what the history is and it probably fits the criteria. So I guess my point is just, you guys got to do the work, and it's not the work of knowing the history, it's the work of Black political power to work to fight the county and the state and nationally. So that's, I think, going to be part of this work. It is that we are here to help give you some tools, but you're going to bring those tools to fruition with your political power. And that's going to take the people in this room and also the people who aren't in this room. And that's, but I want to say that because that's work that we can't do and we're not able to do. We will try to arm you with as much information, but at the end of the day, it's your political power and your political leverage.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for sharing that, Derek. We're going to transition to the second question. I know we're a little tight on time, so we're going to start with the folks that are virtual. And we're just probably going to have two groups share for this one so that we can get through the questions and do some of the stations. So Denise, if whoever's on there can try and share out.
Stephanie, could you unmute yourself?
Good evening, everyone. We have a couple community participants on here who are interested in sharing. I believe Ms. Moore is going to start, and then we may have another participant joining via phone. So go ahead, Ms. Moore.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Teresa Moore, and our little online group on the phone here, we talked a little bit about some of the things that worry us and some of the things that make us hopeful. And so, you know, one of the concerns was around things like the history of the Gum Springs community and making sure that it's preserved. There was a lot of talk about, for instance, the Bethlehem Baptist Church, that the older structure and, you know, the powerful and rich history that it has, and making sure that that's preserved and able to continue to be a part of the community for, you know, into the near future. Things that were also of concern were things like the expansion of Route 1 and what that might do to the community, all the plans for it. I think people have talked a lot about the number of the several schools that were a part of the Gum Springs community. And I think one of the original ones was actually right on the highway, and has since, you know, at one time became Just Good Meats, and now maybe it's another church. So those were some of the things that came up on this conversation online. And then last things to make us hopeful is the fact that we're gathered here and taking a hard look at this and bringing together all the different groups to look at this and do whatever it takes to move it forward.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Thank you for sharing that. Was there someone else online who was going to share? So is there anyone in the crowd who wanted to share add on for the second question? We're going to do one more group. Yep.
So one of the things that makes people hopeful is the work that Mr. Chase has done with the Historical Society and the advocacy he's been engaged in for a long time. That we're kind of seeing the fruits of that now. So that's hopeful. This meeting is hopeful. A couple of things that makes people anxious though are just the general gentrification pressures of gentrification, not only here, but also the national trends and those pressures and what that means for the community here and its history. And then that pressure of developers and just money and developers coming in and hounding people to sell their properties and being on the forefront there. And then the last one was, as much as this process is great and it's hopeful, we want more. There's some anxious anxiety about there not being more people here, especially more young people who live in the community, and what that means for long-term future. And I think there's some anxiousness around that part.
Okay, we're gonna transition to the third question. We're gonna have two groups share from this one. Who wanted to start us off? Specific examples of recent changes in Gum Springs. Anything that came to mind?
If no one volunteers, I'm gonna pick someone.
Yeah, right up here.
Page behind you.
Sorry.
I think Mr. Lewis did bring up in the biggest point that he felt like they were fighting against billions of dollars and trying to keep this community alive and trying to keep this community thriving, because with all the development and people coming in and every time you turn around it's something new, the whole Route 1 corridor that we're dealing with here, every time you look, they're building more stuff. And it's like you said, it's just making it harder for the older people to be able to stay in their own communities because taxes are going up, prices are going up. They're scared that they're going to mess around and kind of be squeezed out of their property at the same time. So I think that's what the question number 3 boiled down to. A lot of them is just the fact of how it's going to affect the older folks, not just the younger people. The younger people, you know, we come and go do our thing and come back home, but if the older people can't hold on to it until we get to a point of coming back to it ourselves, it makes it so that the community as a whole just continues to disintegrate and fall apart.
And just to piggyback off of kind of sort of what he said, something that popped up here was, you know, the average house, you know, in the last 7 years is $800,000 to $1 million in this neighborhood. And that's when you're pricing, you know, you're pricing people out of this area with what somebody, when people want to buy in this neighborhood for a piece of history, it's not the same history of Gum Springs. And yeah, that's it. That's it.
Good evening, everyone. Don't want to be repetitious, but I must refer back to history, our legacy, the loss of the history. I've been down here for 31 years, and it does have a rich history, and I will not be repetitive about that. Paul has told me to go ahead on to number 3. Sharing a specific example of recent changes in Gum Springs that have affected negatively the fact that decisions are being made on behalf of Native and people that have moved here that are not inclusive and acceptable. We don't need you to tell us what we need. We will tell you what we need based upon observation, based upon living here, based upon economics, social, and everything that affects a normal person. This cultural thing, this history, the legacy of this history is actually the key to a people being who they are, being proud of who they are, and being inclusive in a constantly changing and developing community. We don't, you know, when we develop things, it is to enhance, not to wipe away. So in conclusions, inclusiveness, our legacy of a rich history, and the need for the individuals whose folks built this community on the sweat of their back, still having a part and a place in this land called Gum Springs. Thank you.
I'll do one more and then we're gonna wrap up. So, Vincent, if you want to share.
One of the things that we must address is that if you look around the Gulf Springs community and surrounding areas, you'll see that we have a hospital, we have police station right around the corner, we have fire stations, some of the best schools around. We have a lot of things that make this area attractive to people to want to be part of this building here. We've mentioned here as well in terms of what we need to do as people that want to share in the growth of the community as a whole. Is we have very few Black businesses up and down Route 1. That's got to change. Home ownership to most people are their first chance to step forward and have not just it's not just their home, it's their first place where they all have an opportunity to assemble some wealth, and for not just for them to pass along to their kids some wealth. So we need to do what has been done before. Most of the people that are here, the original people here, were homeowners. We need home ownerships. Places like Westport 1, 2, and 3 were originally designed for ownership, not for public housing. Now, we know that people need that, but these people need an opportunity to have the ownerships, for ownership. And the business community needs to be upgraded in terms of having Black businesses up and down Route 1 corridor as a whole. Very few.
Agree.
And the people at my table told me I needed to mention this. It's something I mentioned with the group, and that is that for years we had a summer rec program here called Rec Quest, and a decision was made about 6 years ago by the county executive to eliminate our summer rec program. And that program used to serve about 140 kids every summer. And the numbers I hear now, they have a program called Camp Fairfax, which what a lot of people see as a SAC program. And I believe it serves about 50 kids, and about 7 or 8 of them are from the community. So that's a program that's not serving the community at all. And from what I hear, same thing is going on at most of these Black community centers all over Fairfax County. And the thing about it is a word that some people used to say, it's intentional.
All right now.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up this discussion. For those who took notes, if you could share those with us, that would be great, so that we're able to have more context for the conversation. But we're gonna transition, can you forward the slide, to the stations. Oh, my bad, this is a recap. Can we just skip it? Okay, you heard what it was. So for the next one, we're gonna do the engagement stations. So in the back, there's the map, as I mentioned, and a question for that, so feel free to share there. Over in this left corner is scanning if you had anything to share, photographs, documents, articles. And then in this far right is just a general feedback station, as well as a question about an engagement question.
Hi, everyone. Oh, 1 second. I think it's muted now. Well, 1 second. Okay, there we go. So in the room, you're good. So in the room at the moment, everyone is going to break out into different stations. There's stations where people can scan documents or give more testimony about their experience. There's a map where you can pin your locations of different important places to you and give more information about it. And if you see on the screen right now, we're going to mirror that virtually. So on this slide, you can see a website to what's called a public input portal. There's also a QR code that will take you to the portal if you'd rather use that. The portal hosts 4 different ways that you can further share your stories and memories of Gum Springs with the consultants for the study. There's an interactive map where you can pinpoint locations that are important to you and share your memories. If you're interested in sharing any documents that you have with the consultants, there's a place on the portal to upload them. And there's also a place to ask the consultants questions and sign up for the Gum Springs Study newsletter, which will give you periodic information and updates on the study. We encourage you to visit the portal now and just check it out, even if you're not ready to share any information. Just get familiar with it in case there is something you would like to share. Thank you again for coming and for taking the time out of your Wednesday. We really appreciate it. I think we had a great discussion. We had, only 3 people, but that's great. Everybody got an opportunity to speak, and I really enjoyed hearing y'all's perspectives. If you have any other questions, I'm here, and I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Bye, Ms. Moore.